All right. Welcome everyone and meet Seth. Seth, meet everyone.
Hello.
So Seth is
Hi.
a former student of Craft Academy, and apart from that, a great guy. And we appreciate you taking the time to meet up with us. We have a bunch of new students. There's 24 of us in this meetup. We have 16 people in this particular cohort, and then some in the one that is about to start. And we would love to hear your story, Seth, and uh, hear a little bit about your thoughts about the camp itself, but most importantly, about the life after the boot camp, how
Yeah.
things worked out, what you're working with, and potentially, if possible, map some of the things that you picked up during your tenure with us, and how those things relate to your everyday work, where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be more than happy to. And if I'm a little long-winded, let me know because I tend to ramble sometimes.
The
Uh,
floor is yours, brother. Go ahead, knock him out.
cool. All right. So I don't know if you guys could tell already, but I'm from the States. I came over here from California last year. I got here in at the end of April. I got a residency permit because my wife's Swedish. And when I was coming from LA, I was coming from a producer background, so I worked in film and television. And I checked the industry over here, and I realized it wasn't going to be anywhere near as big as the industry in Los Angeles. So decided to make a career change, and I had always been interested in computers. Um, and kind of a nerd myself. I play a lot of video games, and back in the day I used to make like nerdy anime websites because I was a huge otaku, as they say. But even that kind of stuff was like really basic. I mean, I was doing like basic HTML, CSS websites, and this was before like ES6 and all the crazy stuff came out, and React and everything. So I had a little bit of history, but I hadn't touched it in a very long time. Um, but I did some research and I found out that it was there was going to be a huge need for programmers in Stockholm. And by huge, I mean like many thousands of positions would need to be filled. I had a friend who was a recruiter, and she quoted some number. And now this was last year. I think she said that this year there was going to be a shortage of like 60,000 programmers. So I was like, wow, it's a no-brainer. And I know programming is interesting. I know it pays well, and it's a job that you can do from anywhere basically. So it was super attractive to me. So I did some research. I looked online for classes in the area, uh, and I saw some really good reviews about Craft. I think the first person I spoke, I think I sent an email and I was immediately contacted by Noel like 30 seconds after I sent the email, which was incredible. He must have been like watching his incoming emails. But yeah, we sat down and talked. He told me what they were about. He kind of checked my competency and asked me what my interests were, and basically broke down the class for me. And I guess that day, or was it the next day? No, I don't remember. After I came to meet you, the next day or that day, I think I just joined.
It was the very same day you wanted to do the next court, and then you just
Yeah,
decided to jump on the one that was
yeah.
starting the next week or something.
So and up until that point in time, I had just kind of been piddling on my own, just doing like some basic exercises and stuff. Because I knew when I was coming over here, I would end up getting into this field after doing that research. So I hit the ground running when I got into the class. I think it was 4 weeks at home, and then another 10 weeks in class. We were up at Tekniska Högskolan, and I know you guys got a different office now. And then I left the class 2 weeks early because I got a job offer.
Yeah, and we hated you for it.
Yes. I did it with Thomas's permission, by the way. I asked him first.
He did.
But yeah, I got a super good offer as a front end developer at a company called Mondito, and I ended up leaving the class 2 weeks early. And then the rest is history, and a lot's happened since then. I worked for Mondito for about 3.5 months. It's a nice startup company, but it wasn't really what I was looking for. They wanted to put me more in a a leadership role, which I did when I was in Los Angeles, but I wanted to get more experience, like technical experience. So I got another offer from a company called World Favor, where one of the other students immediately went to work right after boot camp, coincidentally, a guy named Pedro. And he said, hey, they're looking for another guy. So I applied there. And with the experience that I had from the boot camp and from Mondito, I was a shoo-in. So I've been working there since November. I started as a front-end developer working with React, and there was a need for somebody in the back end, and I've always been pretty strong on the back end. You can ask Thomas. It's kind of like my wheelhouse. So they, one of the back end guys there started working with me with C#.NET stuff. And now I'm considered a full stack developer. I've got about 2 months until my probationary period's over, but I anticipate a nice raise and a permanent position. Granted, the world doesn't go to hell with this coronavirus stuff. So that's the short version.
That's the short version. Tell us. Let's start from the back. Tell us about the transition from the things you knew coming out from the bootcamp and C# and .NET framework.
So it wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. But I basically learned some really good fundamentals from the boot camp, especially with test-driven development. That helped me pick up C#.NET really fast, and also because I don't know what your curriculum looks like right now, but I know we were learning Ruby.
No, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, and the experience with Ruby like launched me immediately, especially because we were doing like the full stack applications. I remember we were doing we did Gnosis, which was like back end was all Rails with the DB, and then the front end was React, and we were building like controllers and unit testing controllers and working with RESTful APIs. And with that experience that I got from the bootcamp, I was able to launch immediately into building APIs in C#.NET, because the basics, building a web API, like the skeleton basics are all the same. It's just a different language. So if you understand like the core concepts, like the fundamentals that they teach you in the course, then you're able to transition to another language fairly easily. I mean, there's like little quirks and stuff and like language syntax that doesn't always make sense. And C# is super strongly typed. So they use something called generics, which is a little weird, and reflection, which is a little weird. But those are like advanced concepts. And when you're working for a company, especially as a junior or somebody who's a little bit doesn't have as much experience, they'll have other people there who will guide you through that stuff, and there's support there for that. But the important thing was that I had the experience with the fundamentals, and that helped me just launch right into that. So
both building and consuming APIs, you could say.
Absolutely. Yeah, the whole nine. And the test driven, and I should also mention the fact that we were trained with a test driven development approach is super helpful, because your code is battle tested, and when you start with writing your tests, you just write better code. That means less time people spend reviewing your code. And it also helps you understand how the application works a lot better. And your tech lead or whoever your CTO is really appreciates it as well, because at Mondito, for instance, I mean, great company, great people, a lot of their code wasn't tested. So stuff was breaking all the time, and there wasn't any coverage, and we were like, what the hell's going on? So we lost a lot of time that way. But when you move to test driven, it just helps you write that code faster in the long run.
And so in .NET C#, what sort of testing frameworks are you using? Are they built-in stuff?
It's built in. So there's MS Tests and there's NUnit. That's what we use. NUnit is just a test extension package that you can get from NuGet. NuGet is a package solution, just like npm. So like NuGet is to C#, what npm is to JavaScript.
And Ruby gems.
And gems are to Ruby, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. So the concepts are pretty much the same. It's a different language, different environment, but it's all about getting data and just rendering it into JSON and sending them. I mean, so is JSON the standard you're following, or are you using XML or?
No. It's JSON all the way.
Okay.
The only time we use XML, actually, we are using a really cool new tech. If you guys want to get ahead of the curve, but our backend has something called Swagger, and it basically just maps our API without going into too much detail, but it basically maps our API out, and you can use XML comments in our Swagger setup on our endpoints, and it basically describes. How do I explain this? So, like, let's say you have mywebsite.com, and you want to know all the endpoints that are accessible on your website. Well, if you go to like my website /Swagger, what Swagger does, it's something you can install on your application. It'll make a GUI interface where you can browse all of your endpoints and see the JSON responses that it anticipates and that it returns.
Yeah, and in
cool.
proper configuration, you can actually test those endpoints with mock data and stuff like that. Swagger is for that. We do have a demo on Swagger. I don't know if you watch in your cohort or the cohort. No, I think I did that. I built a Swagger implementation for one of the final projects, but it wasn't yours, I think. Fantastic. So I'm going to keep on asking Seth questions. Guys, if you have any questions for Seth, just go ahead and interrupt me.
I have a question, Thomas.
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to make. How was your first month at work? How you deal with the imposter syndrome?
Oh, that's a really good one. So I'm not gonna lie, I was super nervous my first couple of weeks. I mean, I was like way nervous, and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh shit, I hope I know enough. I hope they don't think I'm like a noob." But the reality is, everyone I worked with and talked to was super helpful and super accommodating. And if you know enough to get hired somewhere, because they're going to grill you guys. You guys are going to go in for an interview, and they're going to ask you questions. They're going to ask you about your experience in the boot camp, and they know you're a junior. You're not going to know everything. Like the whole point. This is a really big important point of the boot camp. As they say in the boot camp, you're not going to be like a 150% pro, but you're going to know enough to get a job. You're going to know the fundamentals and the keystones of programming. All of the junior dev positions that you guys go out for, they're going to quiz you on those basics. As long as you have the fundamentals covered, which they do teach in Craft Academy, you're fine. And there is going to be stuff that you're not going to know. You are going to feel like you're lost sometimes, but that's your experience in the boot camp will hopefully bolster. When you get to that point, you're like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing here. You have to muscle down and you have to figure it out. You have to read documentation. You can ask your other people for help, but you also have to rely on the basics that you learned in your boot camp to carry you through, and you will get there. So as far as imposter syndrome goes, you just have to get over the mental hurdles and realize that the people who hired you know you're not a know-it-all, and the reason why they hired you is because you show promise to become better. They know you're not like an absolute pro yet, but they're making an investment in you because you show promise. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. That was a good question, because the imposter syndrome is a reality that hits all of us. And just a side note on this, it hits you when you're new, but it hits you when you're a seasoned and experienced programmer as well. You know.
Look, guys. Sometimes, so I'm like real deep in back end right now, and sometimes I'll spend a whole day on a problem that I think should be easily solvable. But I'll spend a whole day, and then I think, oh shit, maybe I don't know this material as well as I think I do, or maybe I'm not. I have self-doubt as well. I think it happens to everybody. And the important thing is, nobody knows everything. Even the pros don't know everything, and you're always going to be learning stuff. That's the whole point of this profession. So don't just embrace the pain and accept it as part of being a programmer.
I often say that the Craft Academy camp is not only about programming; it's about working with people, practicing agile processes, but also the mentality and everything that comes with it. Your take on that? Could the things that we talk about in the camp that relates to agile, the agile mindset, and your everyday work now? Anything you want to weigh in on?
I think here's a really good example. So I was not to go into too much detail, but our whole backend obviously is built on C#.net, and our CTO came up with this idea that he wanted to create a new backend that's based on .NET Core, which is basically redesigning the entire application that we have. And in order to do that, you have to approach it. It's an approach to software development, right? And it also has to be tested, but you basically have to come up with an MVP, something that your investors, like our investors, can have immediately that works. You don't go from building nothing to building a Ferrari. You start with a skateboard. It's like actually Pedro brought this up in a company meeting the other day. You'd be really proud of him. But we were talking about redesigning this entire app, and we were talking to our shareholders, and they were like, "Well, we need to get this up and off the ground immediately." So we asked them, "What is the most minimal product that we can give you?" And they said, "Well, we want to see all of our resources pulled from the API and lined out in front of us." And we said, "Okay, that's our skateboard." So with an agile approach, we start from the bare minimum and we build on the fundamentals, and it's an iterative process. So you start with a simple concept, and then you build on top of that based on what your shareholders ask you. That's like the simple version of it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Send my regards to Pedro for that.
Yeah, I will. Hey, dude, as soon as he said that, I was like, "Wait, is the ghost of Thomas in this room?"
I love it.
But he made a lot of sense, and our shareholders are I should say our product owner, it really hit home for him, because a lot of these people that you guys will talk to when you do move on to a software dev job, they're not technically minded, but when you can use analogies to describe the agile approach, like the skateboard and the Ferrari method, you start with a skateboard and then you add maybe a handlebar and then you add doors and you iterate like that. It helps them understand the process of software development and why you can't just go from no app to like what we call a waterfall release, where you release this gigantic app all at once, and there's 1,000 bugs, that just the whole thing explodes because it's not paddle tested.
Cool. Guys, questions?
Yeah. So what's a day in the life of a developer?
Oh, what's up for us? I miss you guys, man.
You have to come by.
I definitely need to as soon as all this craziness dies down. So my daily routine is, and I'm going to go from the very beginning, because I think I'm a little unorthodox, but I think being unorthodox has helped me be successful. I wake up in the morning at about 6:30. I make coffee, and the first thing I do is I go over to my computer and I'll do exercises. I have an account on Pluralsight, and I started doing this before I even joined the Bootcamp, but it was like on a much more basic level. And I'll have like maybe a tutorial, and yes, I still do tutorials. I still do demos. I just call it sharpening the saw. It's a common phrase. But I'll have like a tutorial queued up, or I'll be working on like a personal project that might be like an API or something, and I'll just code for like an hour. I'll read up on something I'm not comfortable with, or I'll work on something, or maybe because I've been in back end for a while, I still consider myself a full stack. So maybe I'll do like a front end project just to refresh my memory, because I forget stuff all the time. I got a horrible memory. But so I do that for an hour, and then I hop on the train. I go to work. I walk into work about halfway, and then we go into work. Everyone starts around 9 o'clock. I'll check pull requests. I'll check our sprint board. We manage our whole project through Microsoft Azure DevOps, which is amazing. If any of you guys ever have a chance to work with it, you should check it out. But it's like a project board. Have they started using the task managers yet, Thomas?
You mean the tracker?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pivotal Tracker. Yeah. So imagine Pivotal Tracker on like steroids times 1,000. Imagine combining Pivotal Tracker and GitHub and like all those cool resources into one thing. That's Microsoft Azure DevOps. So basically, it's a one-stop shop. You go there, your repository is there with your code. The board is there with all the tasks that are assigned to you. Their point estimate system is there, like the difficulty. So I'll check that, and then I'll start working on whatever needs to be worked on. Around 10 a.m., our CTO has a stand-up, which is like our Scrum meeting. Everybody stands around in a circle, and we basically talk about what we're working on. If we have any blockers, if we do have any blockers, who do we powwow with after the meeting? And then when everyone's gone around in a circle, we address any concerns, and then we sit down, we go back to work. And the rest of the day is basically just problem solving. Lunch is at 12. We get done with lunch around 1, back to work until 5. I often stay later because especially I still consider myself a little bit newer, especially when it comes to backend and C#.net. So I definitely put in extra time to make sure that I'm really understanding things or getting those tickets solved. I think my boss definitely appreciates it because I just had a review and he said he was super happy. And yeah, so I'll leave work around 6, maybe come home in the afternoon. I might decompress for like an hour, but then I do a little bit more practice. I think my wife hates me for it.
They all do. They all do.
Yeah. So I'll practice for like another hour, and then that's my day. That's it.
Awesome. So let me ask about a question related to the current situation. I know that during the camp we practice a lot remote work and you know the things that we're doing now, pair programming over using using Meet and stuff like that. Did that help you coping with this situation that we are facing today, but also before this happened? Did the remote work have played a role in your day-to-day, you know, operations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best example, one of the biggest pros of being a dev is that you can work remotely, and everything is I mean, almost everything is going more and more towards the remote aspect. So I mean, that's like a no-brainer, but it has been especially helpful now since all this crazy stuff popped off. I think we were actually, so last week was our first full week where everyone worked from home. We were more productive from home last week than I think we've been in many in the 4 months that I've been at the new place. And they were and our CEO, or who is also like our acting product owner right now, he was impressed. He was like, "Holy moly! Like you guys knocked it out of the park." And we do like a wrap up every Friday with the entire company, and we have to show them what we've worked on as devs, and and they were super impressed with what we've been working on. So yes, to answer your question, being able to, there hasn't been any hitches, and there's literally nothing I can't do remotely that I do in the office.
Cool, thanks, guys. I have more questions, but you know, I want to let you in.
I just would like to ask you, Seth, could you tell me a little bit about your experience during your job interview for the current job that you're on here now?
Yeah, they put me through the meat grinder. I met with I met with a CTO actually 3 times on my first job. And she was a real nice gal, but I mean, she really grilled me. In Sweden, I feel like it's a combination of technical aptitude and like how you are as a person. You know what I mean? Because if they see that you know that, like I said, if they see that you know the fundamentals, they really want to know who you are as a person. Can you work with other people? How do you play well with others? And I mean, that's huge. I can't understate that enough. So teamwork is a really big plus, actually, and that's a big reason why I joined the boot camp. Because honestly, like if I just wanted to learn the fundamentals, if that's all I cared about, I would have just done tutorials until my brains fell out of my ears, you know, and then I just would try to get a job somewhere. But like a big pro of doing the boot camp is the fact that you guys are going to be working with other, or you already are working with each other in a group environment and in a simulated work environment. And what I mean is you guys are doing version control, which is huge. My first job, I remember the first week I was there, the InfoSec guy, the security guy, he was like, you know GitFlow? I was like, oh yeah, dude, I'm a pro. And I was you know, doing version control, no problem. And they were super impressed because so many people coming out with like a computer science degree, they don't have the workplace experience. I mean, they know the fundamentals and stuff, but they've never actually, a lot of them haven't really worked in an office before, and they don't have that experience of working with other people on a development team and having that flow. What you guys are getting with that flow, you can carry on into your job interview, and they love that stuff. And that was a big draw for my interviewing CEO. I explained to her what we did in class. She touched a little bit on the basics. I got a coding test. My first test was a to-do list in React. Knocked that out of the park. I mean, it wasn't anything special, but my tech lead was super impressed when he reviewed it with me. But yeah,
you have to do that at home, right?
Yeah. I haven't met anyone yet that like sits you in a like dark room and like puts you in front of a computer and they're like, go, you know?
Phew.
Yeah. It's so, I mean,
Well, having said that, let's be frank. It does happen
yeah,
sometimes.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen,
No.
but I've interviewed twice now for my
Mm,
first
mm.
job and my second job, and they basically will send you like a test that you can do at home. But that doesn't mean that you guys can like, you know, I would really, just in case it ever comes up, I would do drills just to get the basics down and, you know, have
I know that Pivotal Labs. I have a friend that got a position at Pivotal Labs. The guys who produce who behind the Pivotal Tracker. They actually, one of the first thing they do before you even get to meet a HR person or whatever, they just put you down together with a seasoned programmer and they let you pair program for 2 hours or half a day, and they actually pay you money for it.
Really?
But they only want to see you in action. You know, that's a different approach to recruiting, but that's a different story.
No, definitely valid as well. But now, from the first time I was interviewed, I got a to-do list, and then I think I had to finish it in a couple of days or something, and I was doing the boot camp at the same time, so I just did it, you know, in my free time. I sent it in, and obviously it wasn't perfect, and they asked me about it. They definitely wanted to know exactly what my thought process was. They walked through the entire application. They're like, "What was it? Why did you do this? What did you do this?" So you definitely do need to know your stuff, but you're not, you know, as far as I understand, in my experience, it wasn't like a, you know, do or die situation. And then the second go around after I found the better position, they sent me a coding test as well, and that was like a mock portion of their current application, like a one page from their current application. That one was a little harder for sure because they were using Material UI for styling, and they wanted a lot of the architecture that they used. The React architecture was all functional components. I had worked a lot with class components. I wasn't super comfortable with functional components, but I was a little discouraged at first. I was like, oh man, this is super difficult. I don't know this stuff, but I just kind of doubled down and I took the time to read the documentation, to experiment with it, and then just walk through it. And I sent it in the same night that they sent it to me, and they were super happy with it. I missed some stuff. It wasn't 100% perfect. I think Pedro still brags about his was like, he did it like 100%, but you know how Pedro is. He's like,
yeah,
yeah,
that's Pedro.
Yeah. But they were still happy with the work. But there will be coding challenges that they are going to ask you questions. And remember, it's just as a personality match as it is like a competency match.
So I got to ask you. So one of the most hated components of the camp are the tech interview sessions. You know,
Really?
everybody hates them.
I love them.
Oh, I know you do. But so why did you love them? And could you map the experience you got from those sessions to things that you're doing now, or you know, your process of getting those jobs?
Yeah, of course. I think they point out weaknesses in in gaps in your knowledge base, and I think they also test your confidence, right? So if you go into a room with somebody who is a potential employer, this person that might want to hire you, they want somebody who is confident in their ability, and also I think confident that even if you don't know how to do something, that you can figure out how to do it. Because we've got seniors at where I'm working now who are doing stuff that they've never done before still. And they don't just roll over and say, oh, I give up. I don't know how to do this, or this is too hard. Your job is like, you got to sit down and figure it out. You know what I mean? And they do it over and over and over again. So in the interviews in the class, it was super helpful because a lot of the things gaps in my knowledge that I didn't realize were there were kind of exposed. Things that I needed to practice were exposed. And then just being able to rap with somebody technically, it kind of like exercised those muscles so that when I did walk into an interview situation for real, you know, like you guys just saw, hey, tell me about Agile and how would you like develop an app with an Agile method? And then you start talking about the skateboard, you know, that kind of thing.
Guys, more questions?
Can I ask, like, how how did you get in contact with that first job? Did you apply, or were you?
I applied directly through the website. So they had an article on. They had a job notice. The first one to point it out was one of the guys from class, and they're like, "Hey, dude, you might be really good in this position." So I checked out the LinkedIn advertisement, and then the LinkedIn advertisement had a link to the actual company's website, and that's where I sent in my application.
And you felt like you had learned enough right then and there, or?
Yes. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes I'm a little overconfident, but if I will do everything I'm super driven and I'm super motivated. Like I told you guys, like my daily routine, I'm practicing in the morning. I'm getting the practice at work or in class, and I'm practicing at night. And that was my whole routine. You can ask Thomas, and we busted Thomas's chops many times. He stayed up till midnight with us on a few occasions where we wouldn't give up until our work was done. So I worked triple time to be that ready, and that's why I got out of there 2 weeks early.
Yeah, and that was also why I said okay to that. So you know, you and I had long discussions about this, and so Seth came to me and told me about this job offer, and I was able to make an assessment that yes, he was ready to go.
Okay.
I usually say that the magic of Craft Academy happens in the last 2 weeks, and I think even in hindsight, I would say that was a good call. I would have loved to have you around for the final project. I think you would have benefited from being around for the final project, but I think the end game here is to get a kickstart of your career. And in Seth's case, he was able to get that kickstart 2 weeks prior to graduation, and I deemed that it was okay. But I was hesitant. We did talk about it. We weighed the pros and cons, and it wasn't a hasty decision in any way. But even now, even today, I would say that it was a good call.
And I will say this. So Pedro stayed on the extra. Pedro's a good friend of mine. Pedro and Eric, 2 guys that graduated. I met them in the class actually, and we've been like best buddies since. But when I started working with Pedro again, because he stayed the full length of the course, I was super impressed. He did gain a lot from those 2 weeks. Like he was a badass at React. I was like, damn, dude, because he did when he did the coding challenge for World Favor, which is where I'm at now, and he knocked it out of the park. I mean, he did do a really good job, and it was impressive to see how comfortable he was with Redux after those last 2 weeks. So yes, I would agree with you there.
Yeah, and I also threw a very complicated final project at him.
Yeah,
and he handpicked Eric. So that was a really good thing.
But I can't understate the importance of you guys. Like, look, the course is super important, and they're going to give you the basics that you need to move forward and get a job. But if you really want to kick ass, you need to be doing your homework, and you need to be practicing the stuff on your own time. I know Faraz, during our classes, he was like, you guys need to be reading documentation at least once a day. I mean, he was coaching us on things that we could do to get better. Those aren't just empty words. Like, you guys really got to listen to the advice, because if you're not doing the extra work, you're just doing a disservice to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the katas, right? I know that.
Code Wars is awesome. I mean, start a contest in class. I think at one point we had everybody doing code katas, and people were like fighting for points and stuff. And it was actually became like a fun thing. You can start like a cash pool, put $50 or 500 crowns in a bowl or something, and whoever has the most kata points at the end of class, gets the money. But you need to be doing that stuff on your own time. And just so you know, it doesn't stop after class. You will continue to have to learn new things and practice at your new job on your off time. That's all. That's because things are changing so fast. I mean, every day. I mean, now like React is was new, and now there's this new thing. Oh, what the hell's the name of it?
Vue?
Yeah, no, it's not Vue. It's something else. But there's I just watched a video the other day, and it's like, this is going to be the replacement for React. I'm like, oh my god, I just learned React. Like, slow down. You know?
Yeah.
But
I know. I watched something the other day too.
it's probably the same thing. I can't remember what the name.
Yeah, Svelte or Next
That's
or
what it is.
Svelte.
Yeah.
And
I'm just like, oh my god, here we go again. But this is your new life, guys, and just be prepared to embrace it.
Another question. Now, during the camp, you were in a smaller cohort than these guys are, but during the different personalities, levels of commitment, engagement, knowledge, skills, and sometimes, and you have to work with everyone. What did you pick up from that? Did that hinder you, or was there any valuable lessons buried in the frustration, some that this could lead to sometimes? Or
yeah, there was definitely, there were a lot of personality conflicts for such a small group. I mean, Thomas knows, Faraz and Noel know, but I think the number one, no, I can't say number one. One of the biggest things was everyone learns at their own pace, right? And that's okay. Some people learn faster and they have less retention. Some people learn slower, but they're like an elephant. They can remember stuff from like 20 years ago. Each learning style has its advantages, but I would say don't discount somebody because they learn a little slower than somebody else. Take the time to sit with them if they need help and coach them, because it's only going to make you better as a programmer when you have to reiterate how to do something or explain how to do something. And I found myself a lot of times helping other people, but it benefited me as a programmer because I was forced to reiterate my knowledge and make sure I wasn't just, I was practicing what I preached. So that was a big one. Everyone learns at a different pace, and that's also carries on into the business world, right? So you're going to be hired at places. You might be the weakest link at the time, and that's okay. But one day after you get 2 to 5 years experience under your belt, maybe you'll be the strongest link and you'll be coaching somebody else. And so that's one. And then the other one is personality differences. And I'm just going to speak candidly here. I come from the movie industry in LA, and there's a lot of assholes. I can't tell you guys how many assholes there are that I worked with. And I was probably an asshole at one point on those jobs. Okay. That carries over into any profession everywhere you go. There's going to be jerks everywhere. And we had a couple of jerks in our cohort, and it was hard to work with them. They might think you're a jerk. That's life, right? Find out you just got to remember the important thing is not that person's a jerk. You got to realize you're going to go work at an office somewhere, and you're going to have some difficult people that you work with, and you just got to find a way to work with them and just put your differences aside and figure out how to get through it. Because that's all that matters at the end of the day. Your boss doesn't care about, how much you like somebody or somebody likes you. It's not a popularity contest. What's important is that you're delivering a product.
Amen. That I like the sound of that. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just had a question because you've brought up a few times the importance of throughout your experience doing katas and reading documentation during the cohort. And I was curious kind of what balance you found between continuing to work more and developing more on each week's projects, because there's always more that they give you than you'll realistically get done. So how did you choose to find a balance between how much time you spent on the project versus the other pieces?
That's a really good question. I don't think there is a lot of balance during the course, to be honest. It's a boot camp for a reason. You got to imagine you're basically squeezing in. I have a brother-in-law who has a computer science degree. He went to school. I think he got a master's. He went to school for my wife's on a call right now, but I think he went to school for either 4 to 6 years.
Yeah, it's a minimum 4.
Yeah. So you guys are squeezing all of those basics into 16 weeks, 4 at home and 12 on site.
Yes, sir.
So it's not going to be balanced, and that's the reality.
Well, I guess I just mean I could spend like 15 hours a day working on just the projects.
Yeah.
So did you choose to spend less time on a project to spend an hour on katas or like?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious on that.
Here's the thing. you could spend 15 hours on a project and kind of have it done, but not really understand how it's working. You would benefit much. Think about the concept of the course, right? The whole purpose of this course is so you could learn more and understand what you're doing. So maybe it's you have to make that personal judgment, like, hey, maybe I did crank all this stuff out, but I don't know how the hell it works. Maybe I should next time, or take a break from what I'm doing and make sure I really understand what like a RESTful API means, right? Because I don't understand these verbs. Like, what is get, post? What's the difference? When do I use post and when do I use delete? And then just read some documentation on it.
Let me ask you for a few clarifications on that as well, because see, I try to hammer out the importance of the HTTP protocol, the verbs, the request types and stuff like that. And sometimes and I'm not saying that this cohort does it, but sometimes they do too. But I get a feeling that my students are like kind of listening, but not really, because it gets a little too techy. See, I like to see programming as a creative endeavor, right? But you have to understand the basics of technology, and for instance those protocols and the IP protocol and the all of that stuff. So can I just like ask your opinion on this now that you are a few months into your career? How important is the underlying technology in your everyday work? Like for instance,
it's everything. It's everything. RESTful, especially RESTful APIs, representational state transfer is everything. Everything you do, it's in your apps, it's on your websites. Those core tenets, like learning your verbs and understanding how HTTP protocol works, is prevalent everywhere. Anything that you do that requires internet, you're going to be using that. So the better that you know that, and I would say especially working with RESTful APIs, it is detrimental to your career.
And the good news for this cohort is that we shuffled a few weeks around and we made room for one extra week where we'll be hammering out advanced HTTP fundamental parts.
That's really good.
We're gonna dive deeper into Git and the underlying technologies there, and advanced Git stuff. So because I identified this together with my team, but and therefore we made some more space for that.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. I would say that's super important. Understanding what, like, I know halfway through the course, I sat back one day and I was like, I don't understand what headers are or how they work. And I was super frustrated because it just seemed really confusing to me. But I took the time to like step aside and kind of learn that as well. But just understand like the body of a GET request, or the body of any kind of request that you send across the web, and how it's in. Oh, and also extra credit if you guys have the extra time. I know you're probably super tired right now. But learning how authorization and authentication works, because also think about every app that you guys use, or anytime you log into your bank account or whatever, authorization and authentication, your whole app flow that you guys are working on is going to revolve around that as well, more often than not. And especially when you get a dev job, there's going to be times when you have to work with that, and tokens and jots and things of that nature. That's only going to improve your experience.
Final question from me. The pace, the tempo, so the camp is crazy because we are pushing. Now, I know that you are a very ambitious guy, and we already heard that you practice from in the morning and in the afternoon. But is I always say that the pace that we have at the camp is not sustainable. You cannot work like that hard for extended period of time. There is a difference, right, in pace, and how is that? And do you have like asshole bosses like I was an asshole, just pushing for every small detail? How is the culture basically, and the work-life balance? How does that work?
You mean compared to like the real world and the boot camp?
Yeah.
It's much more lax in the real world, but this goes back to the whole thing that the boot camp is a boot camp. It's like I said earlier, you're basically squeezing a degree into like 4 years, into 12 weeks from like years. People go to school years to learn this stuff. So it's obviously going to be like breakneck speed. But on the actual job site, I'll give you guys an example. Where I'm at right now, they have a really good sprint planning, a sprint review set up. We have 2-week sprints. So, every 2 weeks is like a cycle of work for us where we add improvements to the application, and everything is really well planned out. A big reason, and this is like, obviously this is being recorded, but one of the reasons why I left Mondito was because they had a really poor organization when it came to workflow. There was barely any. And I think that's just because it's a newer application. They're a startup, and a lot of companies struggle to find that rhythm. I moved to World Favor because I had talked to Pedro about the experience there, and the workflow is paced, it's organized, and it's really well thought out from Jump Street. So if you get into a good company, the whole way this shakes down is they'll have a certain, especially if it's a product company, and a product company being like they provide an application. The application is not secondary. That's what the company provides, right? Our company provides an application that has sustainability software. So you start off with a sprint planning session. You determine what the needs are, and usually your tech lead or your CTO will talk with a product owner, and they'll kind of decide what the priorities are. And then they'll come to you, the developers, and you'll have this pool of work. It's all decided upon, and you vote on how many, you vote on the complexity of those work items. And then those work items get divvied out to the different developers to pay depending on complexity and competency. And then that's the work you have to do for the next 2 weeks. And then we kind of have like loose limits on like how many points are expected of each developer. At our place, I think it's like 15 points per sprint. And that's generally around like 2 weeks of work, maybe a little bit less, but we kick ass. So we produce a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's much more pace. It's not as crazy. But if anything, I can't stress this enough. I use that extra time that I've gained back to practice.
Cool. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, people. You don't have to
Always.
work like crazy the rest of your life. Any other questions, people?
I just have one question.
Go ahead, Emma.
Like in terms of languages, because you said that you got this backend job like from inside of the company that you work now, but how important do you think like the knowledge of different languages is when you apply for a job?
That's a really good question. I think it's super important. Obviously, like if you're going in for a front end position, you better know your Markdown languages, HTML, CSS, and your JavaScript. If you're going in for a back end position, you better know whatever that back end language is. If it's Ruby, make sure you know Ruby. Make sure you know Rails. If it's .NET, make sure you know .NET Framework, .NET Core, C#. The important thing to know is if you know one set of languages, it is easier to translate that knowledge into another set of languages, right? So if you don't have a good grasp on one language, at least one language to begin with, you're going to be hurting if you're trying to jump into a related language because you don't even have the concepts of the first one. The reason why I was able to jump over to C# is because I was really good with Ruby. And C# is still a lot different than Ruby, but it's still the back end, like the basic concepts are the same. You're working with APIs, you're building controllers, you're accepting web traffic, you're sending responses.
Cool, thank you.
All right. We have time for one final question, people.
Yeah, I was wondering if there is any specific topic aside from what you already mentioned that you wish you knew more about before you got hired.
I'm actually going to be real specific on this one because I remember doing the second work test and being really pissed off because I wasn't. So when I got hired at the first job, I ended up spending about half my time doing React and the other half being a Scrum Master and helping my boss manage the workflow at the office. That really killed me because I wasn't spending that much time coding. And even though I was practicing when I got home, I was so burnt out from managing that I don't feel like I was absorbing a lot. What I wish I would have spent more time on moving into my second job is Redux. Redux and state management for the front end. I wish I had a lot more experience there, and I wish I would have played with it a lot more, because I know Redux now. I feel pretty confident with working with it, and using selectors, reselect, and all that stuff. But it is super complex, and it's in high demand. There's a lot of people out there looking for React developers, and if you know how to use Redux and Context API as well, it's a huge plus. And a lot of programming tests, a lot of front end tests that you guys get, especially if you're going out to be React developers, they're going to test your knowledge on Redux. And if you don't have it, a lot of those, I know our test was asking us to like mock data, basically build like an entire setup in Redux with your actions and your store and everything. And my fundamentals weren't there, and it took me forever to get through that portion of building the application. So yeah, it'd probably be state management and Redux would be what I wish I knew more about. And if the curriculum is the same or relatively the same, you guys are really going to need to know that for the last portion of the course.
These people just survived the Redux talks. I think I delivered like 4 or 5 five parts Redux, and I'm still not done yet with them.
I know it's confusing. I mean, I still think it's confusing sometimes, and it's a pain in the ass, but you guys are only going to benefit from being really good at it, especially if you're going out for a front-end job.
Cool. All right. I think that
remember, state is immutable.
State is immutable. Yeah, you have to go through a reducer to change that.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't try to manually change that state. You're gonna
no.
be in a world of pain. Nobody else has any questions? I'll take a couple more. I got a little bit more time. Does anybody else want to ask anything? We've got 26 people on the line here.
Seth.
Oh, whoa.
Hello, man.
Enums.
How you doing? Yeah,
Enums, yeah.
That's my legacy. No, so you mentioned like the first job that you had, there was a lot of like management and stuff like that, and you were not really happy with that. So do you have any tips to our student what they should be looking for when they are searching for a job? What they should expect from the company.
That's a really good question. You guys are all going to graduate to class being junior devs. Make sure that you ask questions when you go into the interview, and specifically ask if they have a plan for juniors, right? A lot of these companies, they're startups, and they just want, it's no secret. You're a junior dev, right? You're going to get paid less because you're a junior. You don't have the knowledge. And you're an easy hire for a startup because they don't have the funds to pay big bucks to senior devs. And if they're willing to take a chance on you, it's kind of like a win-win situation, right? Just make sure that those companies that you guys go interview for, after they ask you all the questions and you've proven your competence and they ask you if you have any questions, make sure you're just really thorough with them with what your expectations are, and make sure that they have some kind of onboarding support for junior developers. Right. Obviously, you don't want to sound like a noob and that you can't figure stuff out. I'm like, is somebody going to hold my hand everywhere? It's not like that. Just ask them, just be straight up. Just, do you have onboarding for junior devs? Is there a senior that I'll report to? How's pair programming work in the company? And there's nothing wrong with asking those questions, because if they don't have a plan for that, and I didn't ask those questions in my first interview, I wish I would have, because then it would have showed that they really weren't prepared to bring in juniors. It was kind of like everyone was in the image control and everyone was kind of like working on their own projects because everyone was so overloaded with work that they couldn't take time to like work with the junior, right? So I inevitably ended up being pushed into management because of that, and just helping manage all that crazy. So just make sure that you ask, and make sure there's some kind of onboarding support for junior devs. And if there isn't, ask them, what are your expectations as far as like my work output, and like what's a daily sprint look like, or a weekly sprint look like? Because that's another thing. Remember I said earlier, the biggest problem I had with my first job was that there was a really disorganized workflow. And if they don't have an organized workflow where you guys are going, it's going to set a really bad example, and it's not going to help you be a better developer. So make sure that they have it all lined up so that you will get a good experience there, and you'll become better, as opposed to just learning bad habits and bad workflow.
Let me ask you a question about code quality. Now that we have a few more minutes, we were pretty strict at Craft Academy with all the details, the things that I usually bitch about: code indentation, naming standards, case standards, and stuff like that. How is that in the real world? Do people follow things? Have you seen some things that will just blow your mind, thinking Thomas would never accept this when you review pull requests, for instance?
I review pull requests, and I also get my pull requests reviewed, and it's not uncommon for them to get destroyed. I mean, I write pretty good code, and my pull requests get crapped on routinely. So be prepared, and also don't make a pull request. I mean, it depends. If your workplace encourages like work in progress pull requests, that's fine, because your stuff's going to be kind of like unfinished until you're ready to submit. But when you submit that pull request, make sure it's as dialed in as humanly possible, because a lot of the seniors are going to get pissed off if they have to sit and sort through like really disorganized or ugly code, or code that just doesn't make sense. And if you submit enough of those PRs, people aren't going to want to review your PRs anymore because you're sloppy. So it's super important to just make sure. Imagine like you're baking a cake, right? And you're going to give it to the most important person in your life. Like, you're not going to make this crappy looking cake and hand it to them and just hope they're just going to eat it. Like, you make the best product you possibly can before you show it to the public, because that's it's coding as a craft. It's your trade, right? You have to be proud of that stuff that you're making. You can't just like make crap and send it out into the world. I mean, what does that say about you as a programmer and as a craftsperson?
I just have one really quick question, if I may.
Sure.
I know you're not a magic 8 ball or anything, but you do work in the industry now, and you probably have a lot of people, colleagues, friends that do. With the circumstances that we are in at the moment, and with the last in first out method that is often used when it comes to juniors and stuff like that, how do you think that this will affect this industry that you're in now, with people having to leave jobs and stuff like that?
Well, this is the way I look at it. Nobody. People will get laid off. I think programmers have the least overhead, and by that I mean, like, you don't have to sit in an office. You don't need a lot of resources to actually do your work. So compared to other jobs, programming jobs are relatively safe. So I'm not worried in that aspect, and especially where I'm at now, it's a smaller company, and they have it's not like we have a whole bunch of employees and a whole bunch of dead weight. So me personally, I'm not worried. So compared to other people, I feel like programmers are in a really good position. If it does, and I guess here's the main takeaway: if it does get to the point where they start laying off junior devs or something, or just programmers in general because they can't sustain, I feel like not having a job is going to be the least of your worries. You know what I mean? Like, shit's really going down because you have to have programmers to maintain all the software, all the services that we use in the world. You just can't have stuff's not going to work. It's going to break down really quick. And if they start firing programmers and nobody's maintaining that code, nobody's making things work, society is collapsing, and then you're looking for a cabin in the woods somewhere with your partner and your dog so you can fight off the zombies. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Thank you.
I was still on the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, go ahead, Kayla.
Oh yeah, I just had one last question.
Yeah.
So when you do your pull requests, or I guess coding in general, is there any additional forms of documentation that you need to implement with your code? Like, do you have to do additional comments or files or anything like that?
It really just depends on what you're actually pushing. Like, if I'm making an update to an API, let's say I'm creating a method. Let's say I've got an API where I want to fetch. I'm trying to fetch a product from the database, right? And I'm just fetching my methods like fetch product by ID. So I pass an ID to the method, and the method's supposed to do some magic, work some logic, and then it spits back out some JSON with a list of products or something, or a single product. I don't normally add comments, but if there's some tricky code there that might not be readily, may not be obvious, I'll comment it. I'll remove it before the final merge after it's approved, but I'll remove comments after that. And I'll also include an integration test, like an end-to-end test, like make sure that it can be tested with data coming in and data coming out. If it's a full application, then yes, you want to always include your readmes. Always have your top to bottom, like what is this app? What does it do? How do I use it? And what technology stack does it use? So that's what I would include. And also, and maybe for simple things, you can include unit tests. Hopefully you guys know by now the difference between unit tests and integration tests, right? So unit tests is like, you want to make sure your hammer can drive a nail into a plank of wood, and integration test is making sure that hammer builds a house that allows people to live inside. It's the whole kit caboodle. So for the simpler things, you write your integration test. You make sure you have at least like 2 or 3 that test the successful, try, unsuccessful, the sad path, obviously, and then maybe like some kind of exception case.
I have a question.
Thank you.
How important is the language inside of the industry? Are you working in Swedish or in English?
Both jobs I've been at has been English. Language has not been an obstacle for me at all. And you got to imagine all programming languages that I know of are written in English. So anyone that's writing them, most people have like a basic concept of English. It hasn't been an issue for me. That's not to say there aren't companies out there that are only Swedish. I'm sure there are, but there are plenty of companies that speak English, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Thank you.
So are you enjoying life? Did you make a good decision to transition into this industry?
Yes, dude, I can't tell you, especially now these days, but even besides the circumstances, I think probably one of the best things I ever did was get into programming. It's awesome. And like my old career was awesome as well, but this is the future. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if they start teaching programming in grade school as a prerequisite, because it's going to be in the future. It's all programming. And it helps you think. It helps you think about things differently as well. So, are you
a different person now than before the bootcamp?
150%, absolutely. For the better.
To the better, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's good.
I've become a horrible person. Nightmares of Thomas.
Well, but that passes away. That fades away, man. That fades away. That trauma is will pass. Seth, great thanks for this. And again, I hope that this will blow over soon, sooner rather than later. We will probably do an online graduation this time around. I don't think we're going to get together, unfortunately. We haven't had a chance to think about this. I am not in Stockholm as often as I used to be, of course. But when this is over, we should get together, do an alumni party or something. And I know that you were very fortunate to meet 2 fantastic guys, Eric and Pedro, during the bootcamp, and that you guys became close friends. Those bonds that are being formed between students during the camp are very strong, of course.
They're super important too. It helps you network. And, if people get a job somewhere first and, they're hiring other juniors, make sure you guys keep networking with people. And there's tons of recruiters. And on that note, there's tons of recruiters on LinkedIn that are looking for people. I get at least 3 messages a week from recruiters looking to hire. So there's
which brings us to another thing, I guess, but you can't understate the importance of having a good LinkedIn profile, right?
But let me build on that. And my last point, sorry. So if you guys are looking for a job, don't just send your application through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is important. LinkedIn will kind of get you visibility, but if you really want to get a job, you have to really see if you can get a direct link to an application status at a company somewhere. Don't go through LinkedIn, because you got to imagine there's 1,000 other people out there, more than 1,000, all with the same experiences as you, and they're all just going to do the easy thing and click the button on LinkedIn and just have their application automatically sent to whatever recruiter is looking at it, right? Contact recruiters directly, send them a personal message. If you can get the actual website or find out the actual link to the company that's hiring and talk to somebody that's there, do that, because that is already light years beyond what everybody else is going to do. Everyone else is going to go the least barrier of entry, and they're just going to be lazy, and they're just going to click a button and hope that somebody looks at their their CV and hire them. That never happens. I know people that still can't get work because they're lazy and they refuse to go the extra mile.
Absolutely. And so in a few weeks' time, when these guys are nearing their graduation, my plan is to host like a panel discussion with ex-students about recruitment and about like practical things, what to do and what not to do, how to deal with recruiters, for instance, because we know that they're a pain in the ass sometimes in the industry, and there are various qualities and stuff. I'd like you to, I would invite you, and if you have the opportunity to take part in that discussion, that would be great as well.
Let me know.
Fantastic. Okay, Seth, say hello to your wife from me, and keep that couch and the whiskey for me. And I'll be there sooner rather than later, all right?
All right. Thanks for having me. Good luck,
Thank
you guys.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I think that was a good